Welcome back. The South African government prides itself of running a developmental state based on the Batupele principles. The structure and system derives from the Constitution. To guarantee that the public sector is run according to this approach, the Public Service Commission exercises oversight that includes the monitoring of effective and efficient use of resources. The Public Service Commission is also tasked with promoting ethical conduct within the system. Notwithstanding this, a large number of citizens have a different experience to that contained in the mandate of the PSC. Many have heard of jobs being sold in departments, payments to service providers not being made on time, public servants running business with the government, pensions not being paid on time, politicians interfering with directors general, and in many instances the general lack of care for the public they are meant to serve. To understand these matters further, I invited the member of the Public Service Commission, Phumelele Nzimande, and she's here to tell us a bit more about our beloved public service. A pleasure to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
All right, let's start with the mandate of the PSC. It's very wonderful. I went through it, but I'd rather South Africans hear it from you. What are you meant to promote and uphold?
Tim, we are established in terms of Chapter 10 of the Constitution, in large part to promote the values that are outlined in Section 195 of the Constitution.
Right.
And to evaluate across the public service the extent to which these are implemented and observed. But we are also established to ensure that across the public service there are good and sound human resource practices, as well as to promote ethical conduct. This role is rather relatively new because before this, the Public Service Commission was much more administrative, focusing on recruitment and placement. This developmental role has been since the new Constitution, which took away those administrative responsibilities. As we are starting this drive of campaign to promote these values, we are trying to do precisely what is in the mandate. But in your intro, you've also pointed to some of the unhappy situation that is happening in our space that suggests that there seems to be either a lack of understanding that these values are supposed to be a kind of a GPS, if you like, for every public servant, or somebody is ignoring the GPS, or at worst, simply does not know that in the public service you're supposed to treat citizens with human dignity and respect, and that secondly, you're supposed to give services in a manner that is efficient and effective, and you're supposed to respond to citizens' needs. So some of the things you've mentioned in your intro have actually spurred us to up our ante, as it were, on all fronts, to remind everyone in the public service about
But here's the thing, which and I appreciate you are here. We're going to talk about those issues that some have already raised there. Batupele Charter. We've heard about this Batupele. I can tell you, and I'm sure you've heard horror stories from citizens before. People will tell you that we've heard about this Batupele, but we've never seen it in action. Sometimes you go into government offices, you see a nice poster on the wall which has got all of those principles of Batupele. You can read them, and then you expect that you will see people behind the desks living and operating according to those values, but that's not happening.
The drafters of the Constitution had the wisdom to see that it won't take a magic wand to get a 1.3 strong million public service to just wake up in the morning just because there's a white paper on Batupele or People First and just implement it. They established our institution precisely to make sure, monitor, and be their conscience all the time on behalf of the country and the citizens to say, where are we now? Why are we why does everything that is happening suggest that we've forgotten about this principle of people first? This is why in even driving this campaign, we would be the first to admit that it's not a first of its kind. We are building on the efforts before us to ensure that we reach out. But the reason why we are taking it even on a public level now is that for a long time we've been talking internally. We're beginning to say to the citizens, by the way, these are the things that you should hold the public servants to. But the Batupile and all of these constitutional principles are talking to the public servants as much as they are talking to the citizens too, because we're saying to the public servants, it is people first that you should bear the interest of, but once they have so delivered, we're saying to the citizens, don't be quick to destroy what has been delivered. Use the Constitution to get the public servants to account. But that's not to be blaming them at all. I'm just saying we need to balance.
You know, the unfortunate thing, and it's very sad, obviously when you go to a government office, you want to expect excellent service as per the same Batupele principles as well as the mandate that flows from the Constitution in the first instance. But many people will tell you that lower your expectations when you go there. And it's very sad. And I suppose the campaign intends to correct that. But when you look at the top of government departments and you are an employee of the state, you see top people, directors general, leaving by their droves from those positions. Then you know that it's very hot there at the top within departments. Why is that? I mean, I read somewhere that more than, 100 and something DGs that left the government or over a period of 8 or so years. One would expect, you know, those to be the people who stay in their positions much more than the politicians or cabinet ministers, but DGs do not stay. Why is that?
I wouldn't want us to get bogged down with the statistics, Tim. Safe to say that while you are correct that over some years there was a bit of fluidity at that level, thankfully when we realized that, we actually engaged on a piece of research to get to understand why. And we called that report a report on the administrative and political interface. One of the things we discovered, for example, was that the DGs were beginning to be increasingly given shorter terms in office, something like even 3 years, which was ridiculous. And we made a recommendation to say DGs must not be given anything less than 5 years because you are introducing instability if you do otherwise. But Tim, you are correct that we are driving this campaign in the middle of a difficulty. We are going all out. Part of the reason why, for example, my chairperson, Advocate Susan, could not honor this appointment and I had to do it, is because as I'm sitting here with you, he's engaging these senior levels at the National School of Government to begin to say, even at that school, let all levels of government from the executive down be reminded about this, because part of the problem of sometimes you find the relationships going haywire is when each party does not realize the power of this GPS called the constitutional values and principles.
Now, and I want you to help me with this, because you know, invariably when you listen to the media, watch TV, read the newspapers, it looks like most DGs leave because of political interference. Now, I'm interested in the protocol that governs the relationship and the roles, that defines the role of the DG in relation to that of the cabinet minister, and the protocol between the two, because we've read of stories that a minister would appoint a deputy director or a chief director or some of that, you know, into different positions within department. What's the protocol anyway?
Okay, you'll understand the context of the protocol better if you look at where it begins, which is the recruitment. The minister responsible for the particular department gets involved with a team of other ministerial colleagues in the recruitment phase, and then recommend a candidate that is suitable to cabinet to approve. So the minister responsible oversees the performance on a day-to-day basis of ADG and is responsible for performance contracting and reviewing that from time to time. However, when it comes to specific career incidents of the DGs, like transfers, discharge, the president has to get involved. You would understand that if you report to a political principal that is appointed by the president, inadvertently, when there is a conflict, the president has to get involved by virtue of the minister reporting to the president. But even in law, that's how it is outlined. But there are protocols around the DG being the accounting officer. That is outlined in the Public Finance Management Act. And there are protocols pertaining to the management and the responsibility for the personnel. That falls in the realm of the executing authority, who is the minister. But in that protocol, the minister also has the powers to delegate certain levels of oversight of day-to-day personnel from a certain level down, say from chief director down. Now, these responsibilities of accounting officer and of an overall political head require a certain degree of maturity to managing, so that the two heads, the head of administration and the political head, see and nurture and oil the responsibility such that these legislated responsibilities are actually understood and they support each other rather than being a source of conflict.
And it's not always the case, isn't it?
Human beings are human beings. It's not always the case, which is unfortunate. But I don't want us to exaggerate. There are many instances where it is working. And in some instances, it requires some kind of involvement. For example, as the Public Service Commission, when the DGs are aggrieved, they have a right to come directly to us so that we are able to mediate in some instances. But if there is a complete fallout in that relationship, then the president has to get involved. Well, and our reports often of what we think is happening in that space, the president takes cognizance of our reports.
Of course, we're all learning what the Public Service Commission is all about, and we will be talking to you wearing the hat of the public, obviously, and our experience of the mandate and the Phumelele Charter. As I continue my conversation with Phumelele Nzimande, we'll be talking about the public servants who do business with government and whether that is allowed or not when we continue our conversation.